Hi, this is Gina Hasson, President and CEO of Grow Voice. This is a video short talking about what voice has to do with bigger cultural issues. In this case, we're going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I also like to include belonging as one of these things, so DEIB, and why we care about this as a voice issue. So to answer that question, we have to look at the problem. What is diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging trying to do for us? It's really two sides of the same coin. On the one side, we're trying to perhaps visually, or at least in feel, have a snapshot of our company look like the culture, the population, the community we're actually in. We want to see a diversity of people of color. We want to see a diversity of gender and gender expressions. We want people who are neurospicy in some way to feel comfortable with the company. And we want to invite people that have disabilities or other differences in terms of physicality, also to feel safe in the room. So we're looking at all of these different and diverse areas. And hiring sometimes feels like the sticky part. It can be, but not in the ways that people often think. The solved problem is, where do we find these diverse candidates of quality? There are now a myriad of places we can look to kind of build that base and say, okay, where are these candidates that we'd like to interview? And sifting for what do we actually need in terms of the people that are here in our workplace, not only in terms of what skills we need to actually get the work done, but also what type of people are we trying to hire? So not just someone who's a person of color, for example, but a person of color who innovates in a certain way or thinks in a certain way. Those are things that we have to kind of mix up. So we can't always have just one or two clients that fit into our diversity model, whatever it is that we're looking for. We have to kind of bring up a bunch of candidates and really look for what it is that we're seeking. So that's part of it. And that's an interesting, fun journey to get the candidates in the building. The second part of that is the interview process, trying to make sure that we are countering our inherent bias as we have conversations with people from diverse backgrounds, so that we're fishing for the things that actually help our company culture and environment improve and help the work get done without letting what might be inherent to us as a bias enter the equation. After all that is said and done, we have to figure out how these people are actually going to work within our structure. So we found the right candidates, they have the right skills, they're the people that are going to help us revitalize or energize this company. They're here. Now, is the environment we've invited them into actually one in which they can thrive, work, and stay? That's where the voice part comes in primarily. It is in some way associated with the job search, because while we're encountering our inherent bias, we have to know how we're going to parse our words and how we're going to bring our voices into the room with humanity and empathy and all of those things. But when we're bringing people into the workplace, that's where the rubber hits the road. Because when we look at DEIB, of all of those acronyms, equity becomes the thing that actually makes it possible for people to enter your environment and be at home. And belonging is the thing that knits your entire culture, your entire workforce together. So when we're looking at voiced communication and how we speak to each other, we're often looking at, how do people that don't have a common vocabulary enter things like meetings, enter things like gatherings, and be able to interact with each other without creating that little bit of friction that makes it feel to some people like they don't get other people, or makes it seem like they're not being heard properly, or even makes it seem to some like they don't necessarily belong here. These can be your diverse candidates that entered the workplace, but it can also be the candidates who would be considered like main, middle of the road, common JQ white American. When we look at what's happening in workplaces where there's a little bit of a problem around equity and belonging, we can often see it in the meetings. So we have meetings where people are bumping heads, things aren't necessarily getting done. We are looking at conversations that can get contentious really quickly, or conversations that require two emails to clarify what everybody meant and like kind of unruffle feathers. These are all indications that there is a voice communication problem that isn't allowing equity and belonging to settle into your work environment. At the end of the day, the ideal place for your work to get done is an environment in which everybody can speak with clarity to what is needed, have disputes with clarity in a way that isn't going to be taken personally, and very, very importantly, listen with clarity to people who communicate in very different ways than you do, because that's going to be the reality of inviting people who would be considered a diverse candidate into your company. There's just a lot of different ways in which people communicate in the world, and we don't take one pass or several passes at trying to make sure that we are actually understanding what's happening within the company in the language that this culture has chosen. We enter rooms verbally. That's the choice we've made. And given that choice and the way we have to communicate with each other, taking a moment to have voice communication be something that is not just taken for granted, but something that is vital and essential in your company is something that is a no-brainer. So how does it look when Grow Voice enters your environment? We meet with the management and see what is it that we're trying to do here. Is your mission, is the vision for your company actually something that's manifesting for you? And if it is, beautiful. What are the ways in which we're going to help the people that are currently in your environment live up to that promise, feel that they are part of that? That's going to be conversations. That's going to be something called affirmative inquiry, or some people call it appreciative inquiry. It's a way that we can tell our stories and kind of find that common footing. From there, we learn how to listen to people that come from different walks of life. We learn how to speak to people and how to reiterate the thing that we've said if it's not being understood, so that we're not always thinking, I don't understand you, that must be your problem, and you don't understand me, so that must be your problem. Instead, it takes all of the kind of weight and distributes it equally, so that I am equally responsible for trying to get you to understand where I'm coming from as I am to listening well so that I can try to understand where you're coming from. That's what we do. And if you're curious about how to develop that further, have any questions about how voice communication and appreciative inquiry works, or just want to talk about Grow Voice in general, please give us a try.